Just want to say good morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank everyone for your time today. I'm excited to share with you IFF's journey with AWS tagging. I am Matthew Castro, an AWS technical account manager, and I'm joined by Krishna Patel, global cloud infrastructure manager at IFF. Over the course of this session, we'll take a deep dive, look at some the successes, challenges, and lessons learned that IFF has experienced throughout their tag implementation. First, who is IFF?
Hi, my name is Krishna Patel. IFF has been in chemical manufacturing, scent, flavors, and business for over 130 years. We deliver products out that goes into the retail market to be created. So we're OEM of the products of the retail industry. For example, if you have had vanilla ice cream, there's a good chance that you've been eating an IFF vanilla flavor that was derived from it from the essence. Some of the other additional texture, soybean products, meatless burgers, and even products like in probiotics and yogurts. Now a little bit about what IFF does. Let's take a look at why we are here today.
So, kind of here to discuss what are the good, the bad, and the ugly side of IFF's tagging strategies. As you know, cost effectiveness is a big thing we're able to achieve through tagging. And as IFF started their tagging journey, they were really able to quickly utilize cost allocation tags to understand in a new way where their costs were coming from and how to target their optimizations. Unfortunately, there have also been downsides to tagging from design and operational workloads increasing, and then auditing. And of course, AWS doesn't sit idly by while these things are happening. So we're always innovating and changing what we can, and increasing the complexity for maintaining IFF's tagging strategy. We'll also take a look at some of the ugly with IFF's tagging strategy and how IFF is working to enforce a consistency through tagging across the entire company, along with looking at education and how they have to handle retroactive tagging, which is not always new, fun, or shiny, but it needed to be done to keep the auditors happy. And then finally, we'll have at the end, we'll open it up for discussion. So please feel free to share your own experiences, ask any burning questions you might have. And we're here to facilitate an engaging dialogue around really this important cloud management topic. So let's take a look at some of the good IFF has realized through their tagging. First, when IFF started with their tagging strategy, one of the conversations we had was around blocking GP2 EBS volume from being created, really so that IFF could save, that 17 to 20% on costs and have more flexibility with their storage volumes. It was kind of like one of those things where the light bulb just clicked and IFF was able to take advantage of being able to really have a reason to invest in doing all those in-place upgrades from GP2 to GP3. And then also by enforcing instance types, IFF is really able to control its fleet better, simplify their infrastructure as code deployment templates, and maximize their savings plans by featuring those instances that really have a larger savings compared to some other families.
Yeah. One of the other incentive that came into this picture of having tagging standards was because of BU focused and cost usage reporting back. Accountability played a crucial role in this tagging strategy. In a sense where we have a tower or brand of the organization is broken into multiple business units, we understand that how does each EC2 or S3 bucket or any of the AWS component, where does it belong in the hierarchy of accountability and BU. In these additional questions, it can easily be determined who's the owner of it, what is not in use, what application got no longer are usable in the project wise or in project manners within those BUs, and IT departments who are responsible for things can focus that out, helping that BU standards, break it into accountability as well as having escalation path in case something happens to these resources. So we have broken down into multiple cases. Next slide. So here, what we see is a drill down effect of the towers. For example, operations. How much does an operational spend here? Then you drill out into the business unit. How does a business unit spend? Is it R&D, finance, IT, shared services? This is where a cost of operations is broken down into a different functions, and later on that focuses into the IT departments. Cloud, as an engineering department, they normally focus on the departments within IT. And at that case, we need to have whose owner within the department is responsible for such applications that goes up the ladder to the business units. This department have resources that are built up and the components that are built up for the applications and services that provides IFF to the business units. Having that tracking strategy helps us drill into the deepness of the resources and identify outliners and cost savings that need to be applying in those areas. Exactly how does everybody is spending, and down to the individual service, and even necessary to all the way to the resource level, which is containers, EC2s, S3 buckets, etc. Next slide, please. And then we talk about all the bad aspects of where we do the tagging. There's this positive and negative of things. I wouldn't say negative, but more likely the things that you need to do to keep on maintaining those standards, those disciplines around those tagging strategies. One of the workarounds that we do is, hey, we know some things provision has to be provisioned manually. Some of the cases where for example, SageMaker notebooks that can be tagged, but not at creation time. It has to be a proactive or a retroactive effort. So after the instance is created, there has to be visibility and process in place for it to go back and tag those in services. So it slows down the process and introduces errors, and then somebody forgets to tag, and then later on we get flagged in the audit and compliance reports.
Yeah. As Krishna pointed out, not every service behaves the same way, like SageMaker notebooks, for example. Obviously, we're working with the service teams at AWS to address these things, but it does take time, unfortunately. Also, to add to that, IFF operations, believe you support 56 total services today. And then the other services are either denied directly by SCP or are more of a use at your own risk. It's not really supported, but we'll try to help you case from IFF, and then always put support cases in. So um, another thing is a similar issue for IFF. There's always a lot of choices when it comes to EC2 instances. We offer over 800 today. And for IFF, because they are such a large and global company, and they do a lot of deployments through infrastructure as code, they really needed to kind of narrow down that list so that it is, essentially repeatable, enforceable, auditable, so that they can really just make sure that they're delivering quickly when their customers, ask for new things.
Yep. And when it comes to our audit and compliance checks, that's what we do it at a later period. So provision, there's an intake that's happening, the provisioning process is happening, and then there's a later check in case something is missed out of those things. And this is how we mandate tagging to be there on each aspect of it. Everything in AWS has a cost attached to it, so there has to be a tag attached to that cost. So this is how, next slide. Sorry. So this is how we have our tagging strategy breakdowns. And some of the things are, might be applicable to the rest of the environments. This is on a general level, how we apply. We have tagging strategies on a business level. So division of our tower, top level, is followed by the business units or functions of that tower and the business owners. Something that we have looked into is how each tag and keys are connected to a category. So the tags are separated into categories such as business focused or cost center focused categories. That way, we can mandate and slice and dice the cost aspect of it at a later point based on these division functions and business owners wise. As And then we can get granular into the cost center of those, the departments on an IT level. So then we categorize operational environment and a risk to the business that determines by the impact of a business if there's an outage. So on the bottom part of it, we have operations risk and environment-based aspect of operations. Does the environment situation is where it's relevant if it's risk one in development area versus the risk in production environments. Auditing is also a huge because we have SOX compliance and ISO compliance standards to meet. So we have each intake or decom or incident or changes needs to be audited back into our ticketing system. So for audit reason, that's a very important tag for us. So everything out of these mandatory tags to play and what we can put in. Next slide.
And now onto the ugly. The ugly part of tagging compliance really is enforcement and auditing. SCPs are limited both in character size and the number of policies that you can link to an OU. There are, of course, workarounds, but it does get a little bit ugly when you have to start combining multiple SCPs together or start doing multiple nested OUs just so you can attach policies and have them work through inheritance. Um, and of course, we need to make sure at the end that the right tags are there. So even if you try to do like a capital N or a lowercase n, it doesn't always work. Cost Explorer kind of really shows where having that standard key value naming convention is necessary because both the key and the value are case sensitive strings. Not having the strict naming convention, or at least having a way to fix it later on, is crucial. For example, there's a Lambda function, it's just sample code that basically just enforces all tags to be lowercase, and then you can either trigger it at creation or do it as a scheduled event. Um, but yeah, IFF has been, for the most part, able to lock down a tagging strategy for some keys, like division and environment tags, where there's really you have to choose from those values that are already in the SCP. And then infrastructure as code deployments, they're also essentially they're not hard coded, but they're able to fit the format. Where that starts to break down though is tags like application, because there are so many applications and they're being created at any given time, it can't be as limited. And that's really where IFF moved to leverage ServiceNow intake forms to kind of capture and provide that configuration to the development teams so they can follow naming conventions for those tags.
We have education of those standards is very also important. Um, Module.
Hey, I'm not sure, but Krishna
Is
is
it is
now
his
first.
mic?
Yeah.
Hey Krishna, I'll take over for a bit. Figure out where we were. All right. So education to standards, like Krishna was saying, it's more about communicating, letting people know exactly what they're strategizing on. Every time a new application or vendor comes out or an application is rolled out, um, communication has to go out on how to tag those things appropriately. Um, Sometimes too, when doing to that, errors are going to happen. Someone misspells something when manually creating, like I said, with a safety notebook, because it has to be done after the fact. You know, Mistakes do happen. And some people just don't follow naming conventions no matter how much you beg them to do. So a lot of times there's some random fires you're always putting out. And again, exceptions, workarounds, especially as part of a tagging strategy. One of the things they're working on now is restricting it so only super admins can actually make changes to tags. That's to, again, prevent errors. And having the additional thing that we've done is having working sessions with the different teams to go through those compliance and audit checks and then fix them in that session. And then that way also continuing on that education part of it. Are you back? Nope, still red mic. Okay. This is an example of IFF's, one of IFF's SCP policies. It's kind of showing their tagging strategy for the environment and division tags. As you can see, they're preset values. Um, Basically, if you try using if you don't choose one of these or try using an unapproved value, they'll go through all the work to set it up and then it'll error out at the end. And that's really with education and knowledge-based documentation comes into place to help them. Like I said, they've gone through and created ServiceNow intake forms for their development teams to fill out, and that actually creates a variable file so they can use for the infrastructure as code deployments. Um, there are also some examples in documenting to make ugly into a better strategy going on. However, education really is where the driving force is today for IFF. Said they're working through the ServiceNow forms, and once that's basically fully done, I guess IFF expects to being able to use that really as a core module for the future. Like I said, those variable files go into code so that as changes are happening, they are able to maintain and still update tags. Um, so yeah, are you back, Christian? Nope, still red mic. Okay. With pro with that, we've covered the good, some of the bad, some of the ugly at IFF's tagging strategy journey. I really hope you found some of these insights valuable and at least applicable to your own cloud management efforts. I'd like now to open the floor for any questions that you may have. Really, this is your chance to dive deeper um, and really into any topics we covered here or pick our brains on your own tagging challenges. Like basically, yeah, what questions do you have for us?
I see someone asking a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Malachi. Great presentation, guys. It's validating to hear another customer's journey so closely mirrors our own. Same trials and tribulations for sure. Question though, for untaggable assets, namely network related things, right? So traffic. How are you able to reconcile that in your reporting, or are you still struggling with that? Like are you able to allocate network costs directly to individual applications or business units? And if you are, how are you tackling that?
Krishna, you may want to disable your video. That may help with bandwidth.
I'm not sure it's going to help. How about, is that okay?
No, still red, unfortunately.
I can take a stab at it, Krishna. It might not be the exact answer, but part of that today with their billing now is a lot of networking is billed as a shared service. So that gets billed directly just to the IT department as opposed to an individual business unit.
Gotcha.
If I'm wrong, Krishna, please put that in the chat. But I believe that is how they are reconciling that today. I know, like same with Route 53 records can't be tagged.
Yeah.
IAM roles can't be tagged. Okay, Kevin. Yeah, Krishna said it's account-based allocation to a department separation and then a central network account for shared services cost. Yeah, okay, which makes sense. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're experiencing too?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, we're kind of, so we're in the middle of our FinOps journey, right? I hate to reuse that marketing buzzword that's out there, but it is what it is. Yeah, so we're right now reevaluating the main reporting tool that we use. So we've been talking to a number of different platforms out there who say that they can help us, manually break apart, those kind of shared costs and then allocate them towards whatever tags we want to allocate them to through their tools. So, but it's still manual. Hoping one day to hear AWS say that they've come up with finally a solution to what I'm sure is a very challenging thing to solve. So. Yeah, no solution here. We're doing the same thing you guys are right now. But yeah, we're looking at tools to try and at least move move the needle a little bit on that front.
Yeah, it's much easier when things go right to internet. It's a little bit easier to bill.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I just looking at the comments. Yeah, Krishna, I am totally open to it. Yeah, we're kind of all experiencing the same journey at the same time. So yeah, if you want to link up at some point, I'm happy to chat and kind of share what we found works and what doesn't. Absolutely.
Does anyone else have any questions? I know I have a question for Krishna. Hopefully, I don't know if he'll be able to answer or not. Um, if no one else has a question, I guess I can ask it. When we talk about your optional tags, are you using those today to track either pipelines or versioning for your applications today to separate costs? I know wasn't on the required tags, but you're saying no. Is that something that you'd be interested in doing at some point down the road?
This is very
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Lambda is one of those things where it needs good tagging because they can kind of like reproduce and grow exponentially. And then tracking runtime versions and all that. I'm sure through Trusted Advisor we've had many numerous discussions on how they just seem to show up out of nowhere. Backups, scheduling, and downtime. Yeah, those are good other optional tags to have too. Uh, any more questions from the audience? Okay. Well, I want to say thank you all again for your time and engagement today. And I'm sure you've learned some lessons from IFF's experience, help you propel your own cloud tag initiatives going forward. Again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions come up in the future. I'm always happy to continue this discussion. Other than that, thank you and have a great rest of your day. Back